So small town, born and raised. My dad actually was an evangelist. It is currently an evangelist. He does what Robert does. He's been doing that for 30 years now. So my little family was picture perfect family. My dad's traveling, telling the world about Jesus. My mama's superwoman. She's holding it down, raising 3 kids, cooking, mowing the yard, literally doing everything that she needed to do, just holding it down. So in my mind, she was superwoman. We had this perfect little family. I didn't know anything different until one day at age 7, I was approached by my mom. Me and my brother were actually running around. We were playing Batman and Robin, so we had little towels, draped around our backs, jumping over the couch, and all of a sudden Mom comes in and she says, "Hey, Taylor, Trey, I need to tell you something. Can you come sit down on the couch?" So we come and we sit down on the couch, and she, right when she's about to tell us something, all of a sudden she gets a phone call. And in the phone call, we hear her say, "No, I actually haven't told him yet, but I'm about to tell him." So me and my brother are sitting there going back and forth, and I'm 7, he's 9, so we're joking, what can it be? Are we moving, or did someone pass away? And then all of a sudden my brother said, "I wonder if Mom and Dad are getting a divorce." And we started laughing as if it was something that was so far off. That would never happen to our perfect little family. And all of a sudden, about that time, she comes back, and she says, "Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about something." She said, "I just want to let you know that your father and I are getting a divorce, and that he will not be coming home this week to home when he comes off the road." And in that moment, in my 7-year-old little mind, I knew that divorce was bad, and I remember tears began to stream down our faces, and we knew divorce was bad, but we didn't really know how bad divorce really was until we had to walk through the actual journey of divorce. So what did divorce look like in our household? So Dad, he comes off the road, but he doesn't come home to home. So in order to see Dad, we have to leave Mom by herself and go see Dad. In order to see Mom, we would have to leave Dad by himself and go see Mom. Well, then over time, when you walk through divorce, you kind of get, especially an ugly divorce, and that was what we walked through, was a pretty ugly divorce. So before we knew it, holidays were always shared. Holidays were split. A lot of drama came into the family. And once again, we're pastors' kids, we're pastors' daughters, and all of a sudden, little did people know or realize there was so much dysfunction going on in our household. So from there, eventually my dad, he remarries, and along comes in our stepmom and my little stepsister. And if anyone knows or has walked through a divorce, you understand that a step-parent coming in on the picture isn't the best thing at the moment. Can anyone testify to that? It can get a little rough, to say the least. So anyway, she came in on the scene, and I began to feel a little bit of betrayal. I felt, not that my dad ever betrayed me, but I felt somewhat like he was choosing this new life over me. So I believe in my life there were 3 pivotal moments that I can see where the enemy tried to wipe us out and wipe me out personally. And I would say this first pivotal moment was the divorce. A lot of holes began to form in my heart, a lot of voids, and I was longing for something to fill these things. And I loved the Lord, and I was, born and raised to know and go to church, attend Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, week in and week out, and yet there were still these voids in my heart. I knew Jesus was the answer, but yet I still continued to search. So I felt like my dad, he started this new life and continued to travel with my stepmom and my little stepsister, and then I would stay with my mom, and my siblings would stay with my mom, and we would go back and forth and visit when Dad came back into town. So anyways, that was the first hit, and once again, these voids were forming in my heart and my little mind. Eventually from there, I would just cling to my mama. I was like, Mama is my ride or die, Mama's always gonna be there. And so I would just really depend on her and talk to her for anything and everything. So eventually, within that period of time, we had a personal friend of the family, super, super close friend of the family, actually began to sexually abuse one of my siblings. So from there, once that came to surface and we found that out, that was another hit to our family. More holes in our heart. To watch a sibling have to walk through being sexually abused is very heartbreaking. And so I watched that almost destroy that sibling. And it caused a lot of dissension, a lot more strife within our family of just guilt and blame from the enemy and shame. And so from there, eventually, I was about age 14. My mother almost couldn't handle. She was always a little sick here and there, but it almost sent her over the edge. And so my mother, who was always superwoman to me, eventually had a nervous breakdown, and she went into a deep, deep, deep depression, and that was her beginning of becoming an addict. And she became addicted, and 20 plus years my mom has dealt with addiction. So in that moment, my mom was alive, but yet she wasn't really living. Once again, she was always the person that I went to, and yet I felt like in that moment she was taken away from me. We eventually had to move out of the house because it became somewhat dangerous to live in the house with her. She didn't know who she was. She couldn't read or write. She couldn't really function in everyday life. We eventually had to file bankruptcy. She couldn't work, and just a lot of things to where she became a recluse. She would sleep her life away, lived in pajamas, and it was just kind of what life looked like for us. And I want you to notice, once again, we were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Sunday school, Wednesday, conferences, and yet this is what was going on in our home. And the enemy has come to kill, steal, and destroy. And you can be a believer, but being a believer does not pull you away from having to face trials and being attacked by the enemy. If you're actually really doing something, then you're probably most likely going to get more attacked, right? Because you're a target for the enemy. You're a threat to the enemy. And that's what was happening in our lives. So my dad was traveling, ministering to the world, and yet this is what was going on in our home life. So from there, losing my mom, like I said, she didn't physically die, but I lost my mother that day after the breakdown. So another hit to my heart, another piece of my heart that I felt was stripped and taken, and more voids within my heart. And I continued to search for something more. God, if you're such a good God, then what is happening? God, I need something consistent. I need some sort of stability in my life. Send something or do something. And so eventually at age 14, 15, just a few years later, after the breakdown, I, once again was searching, and along came a guy. I never had a boyfriend. I was 15, so I shouldn't have had a boyfriend anyways. But, so this guy comes into my life, and honestly, it just seemed like a fit. There was these things that I needed to be filled. Hey, he's showing me some attention, maybe some affection eventually. Why not? And so eventually we started a relationship. My dad continued to travel. My mom was off and doing her own thing. So I was kind of in and out of the house doing my own thing. He came on the scene, showed me a little affection, and there we began our journey of a relationship. It became extremely abusive, emotionally abusive, not physically. He threatened to do certain things, but he never physically hit me. Emotionally tore me down. Eventually I lost my virginity to him, and that was the moment. As a Christian girl growing up, I felt that I had to make this work, because the man that I lost my virginity to had to be the man that I married, which is crazy because the enemy will sometimes use scriptures to actually keep us in things that will actually destroy us. He twists scripture like he did when he tempted Jesus. So that's a side note. Be careful how you use the word of God and apply it to your life. And so I stayed in this relationship feeling like I had to make it work. And then, of course, losing my virginity, my worth became consumed by this guy. He cheated, and he lied, and he clubbed, and the list goes on of the things that he did. But I felt so wrapped up, so consumed by it, I could not seem to break away or get out of it. After 3 years of this dysfunction, I was begging the Lord, God, I know that I'm called. I know that there's something more for my life. I don't even know how I got here. As a believer, as a child of God, as a pastor's daughter, how did I get to this point? I know you've called me. I've always felt called into ministry. I've always felt called to lead worship and do these things, and yet this is what my life looks like. If I could just get out of this small town, then I know that I can be free and start over and start fresh. And so then I began to plan to move away and move to Dallas, Texas, go to Christ for the Nations, and pursue the call of God in my life. So I pack up my bags, and the week that I'm actually supposed to leave and go to Dallas and enroll at CFNI, I have a car wreck. And that car wreck, my car is totaled, so that kind of puts everything on delay. I can't go to Dallas, Texas without a car. So within that 2-week period of trying to figure out what we were going to do, my dad approaches me and he says, Taylor, I feel like God showed me a dream that you're pregnant. Do anybody have those parents that the Lord speaks to and they give dreams and they call you out when you can't even, there's no way you can even get around, any way around it, right? So that's been my whole family, my whole life. They always know what I'm doing. So I'm like, oh my God, Dad, that's crazy. You're like so crazy. Like there's no way I'm pregnant. And yet, but I'm doing my thing behind the scenes. And so he says that I act like he's crazy, but then I continue to do what I'm doing. So I'm over at a friend's house. He goes away to revival. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, let's go to Walmart, let's get a pregnancy test. So we go, and we take the pregnancy test. I have 3 or 4 pregnancy tests. I'll begin to take them. And all of a sudden it comes out, and I'm pregnant. So all the dreams that I ever had to move off to Dallas, Texas, to pursue the call of God in my life was now pretty much either down the drain or put on hold, let's say. So what did life look like then? That's one thing I love about my family is they were the real deal. They set me down as I set them down and told them all. They said, you know what, the baby is not the sin. We don't condemn the baby. We don't even condemn you. We're going to show you grace and love you and love that baby. Abortion's not an option, and adoption's not an option. Even though abortion, okay, yes, I hate abortion. However, in a room this size, I would not be surprised if there were a few women in here that have had an abortion. I want to tell you that there's grace for you, that Jesus loves you, he cares for you, that you are not condemned, that you are welcome here. We've all fallen short. We've all messed up. So if you've had an abortion, I love you, and God still has a plan and a purpose, and he will use that to bring healing to others. And adoption, as amazing as it is, I love adoption, but for us, it was not an option. So you know what I said? I'm going to take responsibility, and I'm going to raise this baby. So what did I do? I went to cosmetology school from 8 to 4, and then I worked as a waitress from 5 to 11 at night, and that was what my life looked like. I was exhausted. The dad was in and out of the picture. As much as I wanted to make it work, I could not imagine giving birth to my little baby boy and him not having a father in his life. In the meantime, I found out he had 3 other children by 3 other girls. And yeah, so I pretty much assumed that he wasn't going to be in my baby boy's life. But for me, I was like, you know what? I know that God is a God that can make all things new, so we're going to do this thing. So I worked hard, and at about 32 weeks of my pregnancy, 2005 Christmas Eve, all of a sudden I'm feeling some contractions. I'm feeling something feels a little off. So sure enough, I go to the hospital on Christmas Eve of 2005. And when I get to the hospital, I'm like, begin to explain the symptoms. And before I know it, they're checking me and they're like, oh, wow, you're dilated at a 10. I'm like, okay, you're about to have this baby. 32 weeks, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not too far, so I'm actually pretty excited. So eventually they rushed me into an emergency C-section. So really, within that 32-week period, 8-month period, I became very excited for what God was about to do, what the gift that he was going to bring me. I felt almost there had been so many things in my life that were stripped away from me that I had no control over. However, this baby, although, I had messed up, the baby was not the sin, the baby was a gift, and God had a plan for this baby, and I felt like it was going to be almost like us against the world. No one could take this baby from me. This was going to be the thing that really filled the voids, the deep voids in my heart that were so painful that I had longed for to be filled, was this baby boy. And so, once again, I rushed to have an emergency C-section. And before I know it, they're like, okay, Taylor, we're gonna do this, this, and this, and before you know it, you're gonna be holding your baby boy. And so I'm like, okay. And actually, I'm gonna go ahead and have the worship team come up, just side note, because I'm gonna be closing soon. But so I go into emergency C-section, and I'll never forget, I'm laying there and I wake up. And as I'm laying there, I feel my dad is on my left and my mother is on the right. And I remember they were just stroking and rubbing my arms. And I'll never forget that I looked up and I began to look at my dad to the left and my mom to the right. And the first thing that I asked was, where is my baby boy Micah? Where's Micah? Because I wanted to hold him, of course. Any mother, that's the first thing they want to do is hold their baby. And so I'm laying there and I say, where's Micah? And then they begin to tell me that Micah did not survive the birth, that they didn't get him out in time and he lost oxygen and he passed away. And so therefore, the hit to my heart, the void, the deep, deep, deep void that continued to form in my heart. I cried out like a little baby myself. The one thing that I was so excited to have, the one thing